Welcome to Divorce Dialogues. I'm Catherine Miller. Divorce Dialogues brings expert guests to the airwaves to talk through your divorce questions and fill in the gray areas about separating. From thinking about divorce to how to behave during divorce to what to do after, this is Divorce Dialogue. Welcome to Divorce Dialogues. I'm Catherine Miller. I'm the founder of the Miller Law Group and a trainer at the Center for Understanding in Conflict, and I am on a mission to change how people divorce and help them divorce with dignity. And my guest today is Dr. Jessica McCarthy. She's a licensed clinical psychologist and a certified school psychologist from New Jersey. Dr. McCarthy expertly demystifies complex psychological topics with her approachable, no-nonsense style. And whether tackling neuropsychological assessments, navigating life's transitions, or discussing her own experiences with ADHD, motherhood, and entrepreneurship, Jessica's insights resonate deeply with her audience, making her a beloved voice in both clinical and media circles. Welcome, Dr. Jessica McCarthy, to Divorce Dialogues. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Catherine.
So, what brings you to work with people in divorce? What's your personal drive, your personal experience that brings you to do this work?
I think, boy, that's a loaded question. So I think the simple answer is that I just want people, and it's mostly women that I work with, although I have definitely worked with men, to live, as corny and cliche as it might sound, like they're the best life possible. You know, like we get one trip here. That's it. And I think a lot of times people find themselves making choices in their 20s or early 30s that align more with societal or cultural expectations as opposed to what they truly want. Or in my case, I made choices based on certain expectations, but also based on potential and what I thought would happen as opposed to, seeing what was in front of me. And when people realize that they're kind of in a spot, my purpose is to help them not even just get out of it, but just figure out what that next step is, what authenticity looks like, and how to make a move in that direction.
It's so funny that you're saying that because in my own situation, that is exactly why I married my first husband, because I thought that it would be what was expected of me, what my family would like, what my parents thought was right. Turned out they really didn't like that at all. And I was totally wrong about that. And there came a time then in my late 30s where I was like, I woke up one day thinking, I'm living somebody else's life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting I always I have this conversation with my mom a few times. I have a twin brother, and I was in school working on my doctorate. I guess it was back in 2010, and they were planning their wedding. And there was, a conversation about who was going to do the flowers for my brother's wedding. And my mom thought she was going to do them, and then she wasn't. And I was still living at home at the time. My brother came over to tell my mom that, just to kind of keep her updated with the plans. And she had gotten upset. I was standing right next to her, and she was like, well, God knows if I'll ever have another wedding to do this for. And I was like, I'm right here. And I'm in school. And it certainly wasn't a slight to her. In fairness, she really is great at that stuff and loves flowers and did a beautiful job with them for my wedding. But here I was at grad school, I'm going to school to be, a doctor. And I felt like it wasn't enough. And even, I was probably in my late 20s, and I would, run into people in life and be out, and it'd be like, oh, well, who are you dating? What do you, oh, you're single? Oh, like that was a problem. So, 2 weeks later is actually my sister-in-law's bachelorette party is where I met my now ex. And I thought that it was divine intervention. Like God sent me, it's like a Hallmark movie. Like he sent me what I needed. No, the reality of it is that, I was desperate to fill the void that I felt pressure from others and that I also put on myself. Like I have to take responsibility for my own actions here to fill that role and that need while, ignoring some things during the process that, had I put my own authenticity and needs first, I might not have ended up making that choice when it came to a life partner.
So you mentioned that you met your ex, so you have your own divorce story.
Mm-hmm.
And does that also inform your work? It certainly does inform mine.
Yes, it does. I don't directly take on, people who are actively seeking counseling or whatnot in divorce. I've been divorced about 4 years now. My children are still on the younger side, and I personally am still healing, am still figuring out, kind of or parallel parenting. And that can be very emotionally taxing and draining, and try to figure out how my children are evolving and how our life is evolving. But it absolutely comes up, people I work with, we're all in relationships. So when I think about kind of my journey, I have to obviously be mindful about boundaries with clients and not to project my own situation onto them. But, it definitely gives me a different perspective, and I can offer something different in terms of helping people understand the choices that they're making in their relationships and why they're doing what they're doing, and to really connect with that. And also, what is it that they want out of life, which might be very, very different from what they think that they should be doing in life.
Wow, Dr. Jessica McCarthy, there's a lot packed into what you just said there. So let me just call out a couple of themes. One is still healing, right?
Mhm.
That it's a journey to unwind the marriage emotionally, even inside one's own heart.
Yes.
So talk to us about that. Like why is it that we just don't get over it?
I think I'm not even sure if well, some people don't get over it. I think part of it is that I think a huge part of it is that I'm 42. I've been divorced for 4 years, and I have two kids, ages 10 and 7, two little girls. And I live in the suburbs, and everyone's married. So I think people are either very quick to get into another relationship or just throw themselves into dating without taking the time to be still and quiet and heal, because it is very difficult at this age and at this stage, especially being in the suburbs, to exist and have a life without a partner. Like, I don't go on double dates because I don't have a life partner. There are definite certain social opportunities that I miss out on, or I think I might miss out on, even though the majority of my girlfriends who are married are just home on the couch with their partners. But there's things that I miss out on because I'm single. And dating in the suburbs is incredibly difficult as well, because everyone in the suburbs mostly is married with kids. So I think people don't take the time to be alone because they either don't want to be alone with themselves. It's very overwhelming to think about that, or they just don't want to miss out on connecting with other people, or they don't want to feel like the black sheep in their community because they are single. All valid reasons, by the way, but it definitely can impact and stunt your own, personal and emotional growth trajectory if you don't give yourself that time to heal without throwing yourself into other dynamics or relationships with other people.
Yeah, I think that the whatever one does, it takes a while to heal from the divorce on any path, right? And
Mhm.
and so I think that for some people thinking about divorce, going through divorce, it's painful, right? And that they need a support. They maybe don't need, but will do very much better with a support system in place
Mhm.
to help process that. In your professional and personal experience, what do you think that the most effective kind of support system is for people?
I think that will vary based on not just what someone needs, but kind of their ability to be honest with themselves about what they need. Healing, I think there's only so much healing that can be done on your own. And I do think it's important to heal in the context of others and be able to work through relational issues with others. For me, it actually wasn't dating. I did a lot more dating. I've been divorced for 4 years now. I did a lot more dating earlier on in my divorce, and it drew energy away from my life, my children, my work that I didn't have to give, because I'm rebuilding my life at this stage, and it wasn't worth it. The juice wasn't worth the squeeze. So for me, it's been more just investing in my health and learning how to spend time alone and to be comfortable with being alone, so I can slow down, get clarity in thinking, and just make better decisions for myself and my children. But my favorite place to heal is in the gym. and lifting weights. And I think you'll find a lot of women who are divorced will say the similar thing that, what does actually investing in yourself look like? For me, it's picking up very heavy things and putting them down and then doing it again and again and again. And being able to push myself mentally and do things that I didn't think I can do, or lifting heavy things that I couldn't think I could lift in the gym, translates into being able to have better boundaries for myself, and consequently be able to teach better boundaries to my patients in both my personal and professional life as well.
I'm Catherine Miller, and you're listening to Divorce Dialogues, a podcast dedicated to educating people about divorce-related topics so everyone can divorce with dignity. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts to be sure that you don't miss an episode. And I'm talking today with Dr. Jessica McCarthy about, well, the emotional journey of divorce and how to deal with a lot of the elements that come up. And one of the things that comes up a lot is co-parenting, right? So, like, you have two young children, you work with
Mm-hmm.
people who have children, trying to figure that out. And at any given moment, I could tell you I've got a half a dozen clients really struggling, in the midst of struggling to figure out how to make that work. And especially when the divorce is fresh and new, people say regrettable things and they do regrettable things. And there's a long history there. Now they still have to figure out a way to co-parent effectively going forward because they both want to do that. What's the best way, or what are some good ways that people can create and then maintain those healthy co-parenting relationships?
A couple things. I think that number one, if you can't co-parent and you have to parallel parent, that's okay. There's sometimes, I think, this expectation that I still have to have a relationship with the other parent of your children. You don't. You got divorced for a reason. And that actually took me a long time to learn. I don't necessarily have to go out of my way. I don't have to do all of the things. I have to be mindful of the parenting plan. I have to be mindful of my children's needs first and foremost, but I also have to be mindful of my needs. And I tell my children, and I tell people I work with, there's two ways that you can parent. There's physically being there, and then also financially and providing. I would like put a roof over my children's head and food on the table. So if I need to work or I need to prioritize, that's okay. And oftentimes it's necessary. And I don't have to justify my actions or my choices to anyone. I don't have to make excuses. I don't have to necessarily work with someone because we have chosen to have separate lives from each other. The children need to be taken care of, but there doesn't have to be, if you don't want any extra going out of the way or accommodating. And look, there are people who have amazing co-parenting relationships because there is no conflict and there is no drama. So there's able to be a lot more flexibility. But if that's not the case, that's okay too, because it's important for me to maintain my boundaries, but it's also important for my children to see those boundaries too, because they're getting older and you can't hide things from children as they get older. So I think, being clear with what you need, maintaining those boundaries. And the biggest lesson for me that I had to learn was less is more in what you say and in what you do. And if you need to keep stuff in writing, keep stuff in writing. You don't have to get into a phone call with your ex when it comes to your children. They can text or they can email. And if they lose those privileges, I know no one loves the court mandated parenting apps, but those exist for a reason as well. If people can't maintain, proper and respectful and decent ways to communicate, then you can certainly limit your access, and you might need to be able to protect your own peace so you can effectively show up as the two ways you can parent, being there and being present emotionally, and then also being able to go to work and not be a hot mess because your ex is stressing you. You have to take responsibility for how you are letting people continue to have access to you.
You again said a lot there, Jessica McCarthy. So let me just break it down. One is that there's more than one way to successfully parent or co-parent post-divorce. And one way is this sort of, well, kumbaya way where we're still a family, we still do things together, we're talking about stuff all the time, and we still have an ongoing relationship. We're just not married to each other anymore.
Correct.
That's great if you can do it, but that if you can't do it, there should be no shame in that. That there's another perfectly good way of doing it, which is this parallel parenting idea, where
Correct.
you have obviously some agreed things, some communication about, but it's on a need to know basis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Johnny has a doctor's appointment at 3:30 on Tuesday. Sally broke her arm.
Mm-hmm.
There's a school event or something like that, but that can be in writing, and you don't have to be friendly, or you need to be cordial, because
Yeah,
otherwise,
professional.
obviously, right,
Yep.
in front of the kids. And that this idea of we're going to do this together but just not live together doesn't have to happen. And if it's a stressor, it shouldn't happen, right? That you
Mm-hmm.
should find a way to create firm boundaries. Ways of communicating could be oral, but it could also be through an app. I think that an app is better than a big, like, texting thing.
I agree. I agree.
Right? I mean, if it's like 3 o'clock is the time for the orthodontist appointment, fine, text it. But if you're really going into all kinds of justifications and I'm really not a bad person and you should like me more kind of stuff, right? That's where you start to get into real problems, because it's not going to work.
Mm-hmm. Yep, 1,000%. And when I work with parents, whether they're divorced or married, I encourage people to come up with their own framework for how they want to do this. What are their values? How do they want to show up, and what do they want to teach their children? And for me, first and foremost, I want to protect my peace. I want to protect my personal peace. I want to protect that of my children, and I want to protect that of my household. And the second thing is I want my children to be able to show and demonstrate kindness and respect. And I also want them to demand that from others. And if that doesn't happen, because we can't control other people's behavior, then we have to control and limit other people's access to us. So I make the majority of decisions, I try to anyway, from that place. It's values driven, it's not emotions driven. If you start making decisions from a place of emotion, anger, frustration, guilt, almost 10 times out of 10, you're going to make a crappy decision. And you're either going to run your mouth, you're going to say something that you're going to regret, and especially if it's in writing, it could come back to haunt you, or you're going to attempt to over accommodate for someone and then be resentful about it because you just gave out a wife privilege and you're no longer a wife or a husband, but in my case, a wife. And then that resentment will have a trickle down effect on your children, your personal life, and possibly your job too. It's not worth it. But again, especially with the women that I work with who tend to be people pleasers and over accommodating, there's a lot of work on you no longer have to do that, and you didn't have to do it in the first place. So let's think about how we can learn new ways to show up for yourself and the people that you love the most. And in this instance, it's the children.
So, what, from your expertise, what are some of the common challenges that divorced and divorcing parents face, and how can they tackle them effectively?
Remembering that they're divorced. And that doesn't mean that, they're having side relationships with each other and still, although some are, but I don't have the relationship is now a business one with different boundaries and different parameters. And you have to respect that. You don't have to go back and forth. You don't have to answer to somebody. You don't have to give someone the itinerary. You don't have to give someone access. It's, especially if you've been with somebody for a while, that relationship changes, overnight. One minute you're living together and the next you're not. So to kind of change that dynamic and change how you're communicating with someone can be challenging. And my own attorney, my closest friends who are also in the mental health field, they'd be like, Jessica, less is more. You don't have explanations. You don't have to over accommodate. You don't. And then, but that still took a while to do because I was so used to doing it another way. And I was still working on my own self in terms of like, oh, I'm feeling bad. I have to do this. It's funny when you stop feeling bad and you start making different decisions, like the world pivots quickly. And it allowed me to just be better and do better. And if people don't like it, that's okay. I tell my patients all the time, like, other people benefit from your lack of boundaries. And if they don't like it, that's a them problem, not a you problem. The boundaries change in divorce. They have to. Even if it's a good kumbaya, there's still boundaries because you're no longer married. And it's important to remember because you don't want your children to be confused. Well, what is this? Like what is going on here? There's no right or wrong way to do divorce, but how when you can be clear on how you're doing that, then you can have better conversations with your children about it, especially as they get older. And I think most importantly, your children will pick up on what's going on. They will pick up on the nonverbals. They will pick up on how you move. They will see what you're doing and why you're doing it, and hopefully choose to emulate it when they're older in terms of how they navigate their own friendships, in school age, and when they get a little bit older, their own romantic partnerships as well.
Listening to the Divorce Dialogues podcast, and I'm Catherine Miller. Divorce Dialogues has been educating people about divorce and relationship issues for over 10 years. Subscribe to the podcast and don't forget to check out our previous episodes on the podcast website, divorcedialogues.com. And I'm talking today with Dr. Jessica McCarthy about the emotional challenges of divorce. And Jessica, if people want to learn more about you, how can they do that?
They can learn about me in a couple of ways. So my professional Instagram handle is Dr. Jessica McCarthy, so dr.jessica.mccarthy. I'm also the founder and clinical director of a psychology practice based in Northern New Jersey called Elements Psychological Services. Our Instagram handle for that is the word elements_psych, and our website is elementspsych.com.
That's great. That's great. People listening. I can imagine if people are listening and who have children who are neurodivergent or are dealing with emotional issues that can sometimes show up in different ways, including school refusal, and thinking, well, easy to say if you've got neurotypical children or children who are just focused on their own thing and don't seem to be paying that much attention than to divorce, which, by the way, I don't think there are any kids who are doing that. But in any event, like, how can those parents take the advice you've just given and deal with trying to maintain appropriate boundaries, not oversharing, but also really taking care of their kids?
That's a great question. And it's my most famous answer is it depends. And again, the best case, I know, so people love that doctors say it depends, but it's true, especially for children who are neurodivergent, structure and children who are neurotypical as well, structure and consistency and predictability is key, because when that exists, then children can feel safe in their environments and they don't have to do all of the mental gymnastics to kind of figure out the mood, figure out the tone, figure out what's next, even figure out like, where am I sleeping at night? Sometimes I have parents, put a calendar out so that children can see for themselves where they're staying, where they're sleeping. The research, though, is pretty clear that you only need like one parent who is emotionally sound and stable to have the best outcomes for children. And again, in the best case scenario, even if the co-parenting relationship is a little rocky, both parents can agree to, try to maintain consistency for the child. Or if the child's working with a psychologist or a psychotherapist or a school counselor, that whatever strategies are being recommended, ideally they are being implemented in both houses. Now, this is where it gets tricky. And I tell people all the time, you cannot control what your co-parent does, and you will drive yourself up a wall doing so. So if they are putting strategies into place at their house, but maybe it's not exactly how you would want to, let it go, especially if they're not willing to take feedback because of the nature of the co-parenting relationship. It's kind of like dishwasher loading, right? You might not like how they're loading the dishwasher, but if the dishwasher is loaded, you got to take a step back. And in a worst case scenario, if a co-parent is not willing to put anything into place, then it really depends on what the impact is having on the child. I tell people all the time, document, document, document. Be in communication with your children's support team, whether that's at school or whether you have, professional counselors, therapists, supports on the outside. Document everything. And if it gets to the point where the child is substantially having difficulties or challenges because of the inconsistencies, And if the co-parent is not responding to that feedback, then it might be time to seek legal advice or legal counsel in terms of figuring out what that next step might be. And unfortunately, it's not as clean cut as that, because as you know, Catherine, the bar is pretty low in terms of what courts will tolerate. And, parents really, really have to make a case for there being an issue and being impact for a parenting plan or custody to be changed. So that's also where I remind parents, like, you really need to stay in your lane, because if you get pissed off about what your co-parent is or isn't doing, and if the system can't be fixed and you don't have control over it, then you are much better off spending your energy with focusing on what's going on in your home, providing as much love and consistency as possible, and most of all, not trash talking your ex to your children, because that will be of no help to anyone.
Yeah, let's just take our red pen out here, figuratively speaking, and circle what you just said, because trash talking your ex really to your kids is what you mean,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
Or where they can hear. And those kids have really big ears. And
Hmm.
if they're at school and you're talking to the neighbor, are you sure the neighbor isn't saying that to their spouse, who's saying it in front of their kids, who's saying it to your
Hmm.
kids? Like, you don't know what's
No.
going to happen with that. And that is something you just can't take back. And so keep it to therapy, right? Your
Yep.
religious advisor, but
Yep.
keep it really, really private. And I'm not saying you shouldn't, and see if you disagree with me, Jessica, you should have a support system where you can tell the truth, where you can
Hmm.
say all that stuff. I'm not saying don't say it. I'm just saying don't say it to your kids, because it's not good for them emotionally, right?
Correct. Correct.
And
Correct.
it's
Correct.
going to suck for you legally.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be a big problem, especially if you put it in writing. I mean, look, I tell my kids all the time that, and parents and kids that I work with, I want my children to make decisions about myself, their father, because of their own interactions and experiences, not what I'm telling them. Like, what the hell do I know in terms of anything? I mean, yeah, I'm a psychologist, but like, in terms of what my children think about things and who they think about things, I don't want to influence that. I want to influence bigger picture stuff, like what is right, what is wrong, what you should tolerate, what you shouldn't tolerate, what boundaries look like, what healthy relationships look like. We will have conversations, and we do have conversations on a regular basis about that. How they choose to apply that information to other people in their life is their decision. And that is very, very hard for parents to do sometimes, because if I see something one way, I want everyone to see it that way. But, and this is kind of one of my parenting philosophies, they're my children, but they're not my children. They are their own individual, they're their own little people who are going to have thoughts and opinions that may be in line with mine or may differ from mine. My job is to give them a roadmap. It's their job to figure out what they want to do with that roadmap. And they will never have whatever they think about other people in their life, it won't be because of something that I do or I influence. But I do want to give them the tools to vet and make decisions about those people accordingly.
So, Dr. Jessica McCarthy, we're almost out of time here, but as we wrap up the show, what advice do you have for listeners? What's one thing that you would say to someone currently navigating the complexities of divorce or thinking about it?
I think the best piece of advice that I got from a very dear friend of mine who is divorced and remarried, one of my dear friends who I've known since our children were babies. They went to daycare together, and she's still a very good friend of mine to this day. When I told her I was getting divorced, she said to me that divorce will get you out of one situation. It will not guarantee, though, a happy ending in the next. You have to put that work in. And divorce can be incredibly scary. And the uncertainty is prevalent because most people don't get married thinking that they're going to end up divorced. A lot of times, people also think that divorce, I'm going to get out of this and then my life is going to get infinitely better, or I'm going to get divorced and I'm going to meet Prince Charming or Princess Charming right away or all these other things. But that's not the case. Divorce gets you out of one situation and it gives you, a blank a piece of paper and a pen to write that next chapter. Be mindful and intentional and purposeful with how you write it, because if all you do is continue to make the same mistakes that you did in a previous chapter, you're just telling the same story over and over again. I think I think of divorce as an opportunity to pivot and do things a little bit differently and to learn about yourself and what you want in this life and to be able to go get it. Because I really do think that, despite all the upheaval and the craziness in the world, that there's so much beauty. There are good people out there, and there's so much to be had in this life, even if it took a pivot from the direction that you thought it was going to go in.
One of the things that I say to my clients all the time is that divorce is at the intersection between what was and what will be.
Ooh,
And
I
what
love
I
that.
and what I hear you saying, which I 100% endorse, is that each person is in charge of writing that will be story. And
Yes.
you take the elements that you have at the intersection, you think about what you most want, and the people who are most successful craft with that a new weaving of something that's a lot better for them, whether or not they chose the divorce or didn't.
hmm And yes, I honestly, I could not agree more as long as people step into that. I think the statistics on divorce, for a second marriage is even higher than the first. And I think that sometimes happens because people don't take the time to slow down and really figure out who they are, the mistakes that they made in a previous marriage. Because even if it wasn't their fault, quote unquote, like I still made mistakes. Everyone made
Of
mistakes. Or
course.
like, or what would you do differently? And if people don't take the time to kind of figure that out and adjust accordingly, then all of the stress and the emotional and financial and logistical upheaval was for nothing.
Dr. Jessica McCarthy, thank you so much for being my guest on Divorce Dialogues. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Catherine, thank you so much for having me.